Welcome, everyone. Today is Wednesday, October 13th. I'm your host, Richard Rupp, with my co-host, as always, the Ordinary Joe, Joey Salvador. Today, we're excited to have a returning guest with us, the former Conservative Party of Canada leadership contender, Richard Descaries. You're watching Power Drill Politics, only here on OJTV, The Ordinary Joe Show.
You're the original Ordinary Joe, but I'm an Ordinary Joe too.
My name is John Tory. I'm the Mayor of Toronto, and you are watching The Ordinary Joe Show. And this is Ordinary Joe right here. He's right here.
It's just another Ordinary Joe Show. Hello, hello, Richard. I think things are working properly now. How are you?
I'm great. How are you doing, Joe?
Not too bad. I'm always having that nap before the show, so I'm happy. I'm energetic. I'm ready to go. I'm very excited with our returning guest. He used to be also the chief of staff of the former Prime Minister Stephen Harper, right? When he was the opposition leader.
That is correct. That's absolutely correct. Yeah, he has quite a resume, and we're very excited to have him again because we're going to give him a chance to give us his take on the election results and, things that are happening in Quebec, things that are happening across the country, and as well discuss what his thoughts are about the current leadership of the Conservative Party of Canada.
And I know that I heard also that he is collaborating with Derek Sloan to, if the election didn't happen right when we didn't expect it to happen, that they were on the process of filing to Elections Canada a new party, True North Party, right?
That's right. So we're looking forward to asking some questions about that and Derek Sloan himself.
Awesome. Yeah, I would like to see Derek Sloan on our show too very soon. But well, without much further ado, why don't we introduce? Do you have an introduction for our special guest today?
Yeah, I can give a bit of a background to our audience if they haven't seen Monsieur Descaries before on our show. Like you said, he is originally from Montreal, Quebec. He was the chief of staff and senior advisor to Premier Daniel Johnson of Quebec. He became deputy chief of staff to Stephen Harper while Stephen Harper was leader of the official opposition. And Richard Descaries is known to be a social conservative. He was a candidate, as I had mentioned, in the 2020 leadership of the Conservative Party of Canada. He proposed defunding abortion federally. He proposed other socially conservative ideas. He did meet as a leadership contender of the initial criteria of raising the $25,000 entry fee, and he did receive 1,000 signatures from party members. But the Conservative Party's leadership election organizing committee, known as LEOC, met and decided not to approve his candidacy, and he was removed from the leadership race and from the ballot. He is also a political commentator now on Théovox Actualité in French, and we're very excited to have him because he has a great political experience, and I'm sure there's lots for us to learn from this interview.
I'm excited to listen to your French accent. You can you can really you can really pronounce French words very very beautifully. Ladies
Thank
and gentlemen of Power Drill Politics, please welcome our honored guest today, Mr. Richard Decarie.
Good evening.
Good evening, Mr. Decarie. Hello, hello, sir. How are you doing?
I'm great, and you?
Awesome, awesome. Thank you for joining us again. I think my microphone. Am I coming too loud there, Richard? I hope it's not too loud.
a little bit, but you're okay.
All right. Hello, Mr. Dickory. Nice to see you again. Thank you for coming back to our show. Would you give us a little update, like an opening statement, since the last time we saw you? Then there was an election. Give us a little update of how things with you, and then we'll take it from there.
For sure. Thanks for having me again. I think you must have liked the first interview since you invite me again. So I'm glad to be here. Like you know, I'm always available to explain to Canadians what's happening in this beautiful country. That I had the chance since we spoke. I had the chance to travel by car since I don't take the plane because of the COVID crisis. So I don't trust having two pilots in a plane who have got the shots. So it's that simple. They're not allowed to eat the same food in case of poisoning, but they can take the shots of poison, both of them.
Oh wow.
So that's a bit crazy for me. So I drove all the way to Calgary because, as you know, Derek Sloan was running in a riding in Alberta, in beautiful Banff Airdrie riding, and we'll start or restart the what I call the Reform Number Two party out from the West, and that needs to be done the same way it had been done the first time. And now I think we have a great man to lead that. And so I went there to give him the, give him a hand, but also tell Albertans about Quebec, because most Albertans have this preconceived idea of Quebec. As in Quebec, they have that preconceived idea of Alberta. So for me, it's very important to be an ambassador of both provinces because we are in the same country. And as you probably know, the Maverick didn't do too well. The Maverick Party didn't do too well because a separatist party, even in Quebec, doesn't go very far. We are in a beautiful country. We need to bring back this country to the conservative values, traditional values that we used to have, instead of fighting about our differences.
So, Richard, let's start with the election results, and then we'll jump over to Banff Airdrie because I'm very interested about how that played out. But what's your take on the election results? About how PPC, they increased their vote a little bit, but we still have Trudeau in a minority government. He's controlling the levers of power. What is your take? What are your thoughts about this election?
First of all, I don't know if I said it during the first show I did with you, but I had predicted an election in September. I had even pushed the envelope all the way to saying it will be September 27th. 27th, yes, and it was 28th because they wanted to have it as soon as possible. So it's not too bad for a 6 month prediction. I also said we'll have an election that will bring us back to where we were before the election. Mm-hmm. And we will have Mr. O'Toole, who will prove that he's not a leader because he's not a conservative leader. He is a progressive conservative at the best, but very liberal in many ways, as you can imagine. And also, he's behind the fact that I was kicked out of the leadership race. We have a lot of friends in this party, and a lot of members are very upset about what happened there. And what I told them is if you stay in this party until the election, you will see the result will speak by themselves, in the fact that it cost, even Mr. O'Toole repeated it very often, saying it cost $600 million to do an election for nothing. Yes, but you have proven that you're not the man to be governing this country neither. Mm-hmm. And I think he is in an awkward position with the leadership of this party because he has proven that by kicking out social conservative like myself and others, and also Derek Sloan. Derek Sloan was in the caucus and
Yes.
was kicked out of caucus, and that's a major stand for a leader. He needs to prove that it was a good decision, and I think he has proven that it was a bad decision.
Hmm. Mr. Decree, it seems like Derek Sloan and social conservatives do get a lot of support from what we call the freedom movement. Those who are opposing the, who are who are pushing for rolling back the mandates, the masking, and the mandatory vaccines and all that. But within the freedom movement, it seems like there's many that are socially conservative. There are many also who are libertarian, but there are also this tune now among the freedom movement. They're saying no, trust no politicians. Politicians shouldn't have a place in our movement. And very strong voice for that is Chris Guy, who is also a very strong voice in the movement. And what do you say when people are saying we don't trust the political workings of Canada? What can we say to them today?
I can blame Canadians of having lost their confidence in politicians. I think from what we've been seeing for the past 2 3 decades, it's incredible what's happening. We are controlled in many ways. But what I would say also is I'm presented as a social conservative. In fact, I'm a real conservative, and my movement in Quebec is called Conservative Union. So I think the conservative philosophy needs to be re-educated to people, or retold to people, because a lot of people are separating a lot of trends inside this party. Like libertarian is one part of it, but you cannot elect a government that is a libertarian government, and that's the problem with the PPC. We didn't talk about that, but they only made 5.7% at the last election, and as you know, libertarians will never go higher than 25%. That's the record that we've seen in the States, where libertarians are pretty strong, because they are there to talk about freedom, liberty, but freedom comes from saying the truth. And when you're saying the truth, telling the truth, you are having a moral stand politically. And the libertarian have no moral stand. They're only there to contest. And when you refer to the freedom movement that Derek Sloan was part of, with on the side of Mr. Hillier or Mr. Bernier, it's nice to be in this movement, because we have to say that the COVID crisis that is kept alive by this government to take out our freedom, it needs to be told. But once you are presenting a political party that could govern this government or change the way that this nation is governed, we need to have a party that will have a structure, a moral structure. And that's where we don't have that with the CPC anymore. They're liberals. And now with the PPC, you only have a party that can say they can yell liberty, liberty, but what will you be doing to rebuild this country? They don't have a real plan. They're just there to contest. And that's my point. A guy like Chris Guy, he's yelling a lot. He's seeing through the reality. From his point of view, he's saying the truth probably. But at the end, we need to have politicians who will bring us solutions. And that we don't see it at the present time.
Richard.
So let's go back to Derek Sloan, because this is very interesting. Two questions for that. One is he continuing to register his new party, True North Party? Number one. And number two, let's discuss his election results, because it was more disappointing than what we expected. He wasn't able to unseat Blake Richards, and Blake Richards still won handily in Banff Airdrie.
I don't think Blake Richards won in Banff Airdrie. I think the CPC is there by default, I would say. And this guy never campaigned really in the past, and now they saw us coming there doing door knocking every day with teams in the streets. They got scared. They saw that we were campaigning for real. So the first question is, yes, he is continuing, because, like you said in the introduction, he has started this new party, True North Party of Canada, and Election Canada stopped the process before the election. giving some excuses like we need to put our staff on other things. The only thing that Election Canada needs to do is to validate the 250 signatures.
Mm-hmm.
So in a country like Canada, you can imagine that it doesn't take long to have 250 people who support Derek Sloan. I can recall the fact that he raised $1.3 million during the leadership race. And with this local campaign, because he was forced to run as an independent in Banff-Airdrie. And because of that, as you know, people don't vote for independent candidates unless you are a big, well-known person or a big star or something. So he had a good was well perceived by Albertans. A lot out of the riding, a lot of Albertans were supporting him, but he said, I'm stuck in one riding for the moment until we have this party on. So I think it was for the best, because it gave us the opportunity to show to the Albertans, first of all, that he was serious about moving to Alberta with his family and starting the new party out of there. And I was present to show that Quebec is part of this movement. We have a real conservative movement, even though Mr. O'Toole always said that he's a true blue. He's not. He's a red blue, and we all know that. He's a red Tory. So because of that, we are the real thing, and people know it. We were forced to have a maximum of $140,000 to be raised in this campaign in one riding, and after $270,000, we had to tell people to stop sending money. So that's the kind of success that this guy has out west and also across the country, because he's well known for his stand on morality and freedom, and that's where you need to have the whole political policies that needs to be presented eventually, and that will be the work that he will have to do for the next years until an election will be called, maybe in 24 or 30 months from now.
Yeah, I'm brushing up on some of my history, Mr. Dickery, and I found out from a book that I'm rereading, Carol Quigley's Tragedy and Hope. He described that, he kind of described in that book that Woodrow Wilson's presidency was because of Teddy Roosevelt. He was saying Teddy Roosevelt elected Woodrow Wilson as the president for splitting the vote. And I think they were saying that Teddy Roosevelt was sort of like a controlled opposition to split the vote of the Republicans. And so we hear that a lot during elections, the PPC splitting the vote. However, we don't really hear a lot of complaints, or maybe because I'm new to the political circle, I don't hear a lot of complaints from the Liberals for NDP splitting the vote. So is it, do you think that splitting the vote is an infiltration from the other side? And does it really, is it better that we have one conservative party rather than, multiple conservative parties?
I don't think you have multiple conservative parties. Like I said, you can have a libertarian, you can have a liberal light party, but the only conservative party that should be there is not there anymore. Yeah. I've helped Harper build the Conservative Party in 2003, 4, or 5. We were there to bring back that real conscience about a real conservative philosophy behind, and that was bringing the reform. What the reform did is to build a party out of the west of Canada, English, unilingual English, and that was a mistake. They should have started a party to include Quebec and French Canadians. And because of that, they kind of not got the success they expected. And I think with the Conservative Party that was built with Harper, we had something in 2005, and we were elected in 2006, showing that there was a capacity to become government with policies that were not that interesting for people. Back in those days, it was hard to sell conservative values or policies. You can imagine in Quebec, when I had to sell those policies, it was harder, but we had success, a lot of success. Harper got elected at the leadership race on the first ballot because of Quebec. We brought him what needed to be brought so he can win at the first run, and he didn't have to negotiate with the Red Tories behind Brian Mulroney in those days. So that's the way it works globally. So I don't think we can talk about splitting the vote coming from parties other than the CPC. I think it's a mistake to do that. The CPC became liberal over the years, unfortunately, and because of that, they splitted the vote by excluding, first of all, Maxime Bernier. If you remember what happened with Maxime Bernier, he didn't start a new party because he wanted to do it anyway. It was because he was pushed out of this party. At that time, it was with Andrew Scheer. Andrew Scheer should have kept him with him and give him a standing in the party that would have been at the level of his involvement, because Maxime Bernier did a great leadership race back in those days. Secondly, when we had the last leadership race, they kicked myself out from this leadership race without any reason. Mm-hmm. And I am quoting what the party officially said to the Globe and Mail in those days. They said, "We didn't kick him out because of what he said publicly. So what else?" There's nothing. So it's only a vengeance position. And I know that O'Toole's people were behind that, and probably McKay at that time. The Red Tories are against social conservative, as you know. So they have splitted the vote 2 times. And now we got the result with the last election. Because if you're splitting the vote, you have somebody like Derek Sloan who starts a new party. And we had to fight with the PPC in the riding where we were, because Maxime Bernier was not noble enough not to put any candidates in this riding against Derek Sloan. Derek Sloan had said, if I have a party, I won't put a candidate against Maxime Bernier in his own riding. So that would have been the first noble thing to do. And Maxime is very self-centered person. So he decided to put a candidate, a strong candidate, who did 8%. And as an independent, usually you get about 1.52% of the vote when you run as an independent. And Derek did 3%, proving that he did a great campaign. But you have to recall that the CPC went from 70% to 57%. Mm-hmm. So they lost 13% based on the fact that Mr. O'Toole and all the liberals inside this party splitted the vote years before this election.
Quick follow-up, Mr. Lecarie. Where did you think the social conservatives vote went to this last election?
In the riding where we were, they were telling us I did a lot of door knocking with we had a lot of teams on the road, so we had a feel about what was happening. People were amazed to see a candidate like Derek Sloan, and they would say, "We agree with your values," but when it comes to vote, they want to defeat the government. They want to defeat the liberals, the real liberals. They want to defeat Trudeau. As you can see today, Trudeau is at a very low, historical low of popularity, even in his own party. I don't think he's going to survive until the next election, personally. So people were very upset when we were door knocking about the Trudeau government and the problems with the COVID crisis and the lockdowns and all that. So when you vote like this, you want to defeat the government, so you vote for the biggest option that was still the CPC back there. So I think that's why the results didn't change at all. We have about the same thing. Even in Quebec, you didn't see a breakthrough with the Bloc. You didn't see any breakthrough with the CPC in Quebec. It was like changing 4 quarters to $1, and the cost is $650 million. That's the way to look at it.
It's a Groundhog Day, I think. Richard.
All right, so now we have the results of the election. Aaron O'Toole is still the leader of the Conservative Party. The caucus of the Conservative Party has triggered the Reform Act, has triggered that there's going to be some form of a leadership review. He's tapped James Cummings from Edmonton, who lost his riding, to do the post-mortem on the election. What are your thoughts about Aaron O'Toole's chances of staying in the leadership? What's your prediction for the leadership of the Conservative Party in the future? And who do you think are the potential contenders if Aaron was not to succeed as the leader of the Conservative Party?
First of all, what happened recently, it wasn't, much in the news, but what is important now, with 20% of the caucus, we can decide to kick out the leader out. That's major. So I think they are working on that at the present time. And it's not an easy task, because you can imagine, as an MP, when you're solicited to go against the leader, it's not an easy task.
Mm-hmm.
So we have to salute those who are working through that process. I think it's a beneficial process in a situation like the present one. It's not like when we were with Harper, who had rebuilt this party, who was behind, the union of the rights, I would say. Now you have a leader who was doing the opposite. He was, putting knives in the back of others, especially the social conservatives. And you know that there's internal feuds a lot left from the leadership, who was very close by. And this party had two leaderships already in few years, and will probably have another one pretty soon. So you can imagine that it's hard to keep the family together. So based on that, I don't think he's going to survive the leadership review. And if he does, he will lose the election again if there's another election in 30 months. So it's only bringing the right lower if it stays the way it is. And if not, if the review is successful and that they review him, the review his leadership, I think it's going to be the turn of Pierre Poilievre, that you call in English. But Pierre Poilievre is bilingual. He knows a lot about politics, because when I was with Harper, he was a kid, as you recall, like Andrew Scheer and Rob Enders and others. They were kids in politics in those days, but now they have grown in the job. And I think Pierre has a great experience inside the party. Unfortunately for him, when I came out during my leadership race about defunding abortion, and I said that gay was a choice and the marriage was between a man and a woman, this guy and Aaron O'Toole freaked out literally on Twitter, if you recall that. Yes. They were all over the place with Michel Rampol like crazy. I thought they were liberals, not conservative. And they were so strong against my values, that are the conservative values, that they kind of lost their tracks. And I think Pierre Poilievre, a lot of people thought he was a social conservative, but he came out of the closet saying that he was pro-abortion and pro-gay. So the job is done. If it's Pierre Poilievre that becomes the leader after a leadership, this party is doomed. They will stay where they are presently. And if Peter MacKay wants to make a return and he runs, it's going to be the same thing. Those guys are against the fundamentals of conservatism, that is social conservatism.
So you think the Conservative Party can't win if there is going to be a leadership review and, say, for example, the interim leader or the final leader becomes Pierre or Peter MacKay? You think it's the same status quo as with Aaron O'Toole?
It's impossible. Why? Because the Liberal Party, a very strong organization, as you can know. I started in politics with the Liberals. I've learned all their tricks. I know the way they work. I can tell you they know a lot about politics, organizations, and how to manipulate people. So those guys are weighing at this point, should we change the leader? They are doing the same process internally, but they're more subtle. They will do it in a way that it will be efficient, and you will wake up one morning with a new leader that will be very strong compared to Trudeau. And that's where a guy like Pierre Poilievre or Peter MacKay could never win against Mark Carney, let's say.
So, go ahead, Joe.
Okay. I had an opportunity to have a Zoom call with Mr. Poilievre twice in the spring, and once was with a radio show in Ottawa, and I asked him about the mandatory vaccine if it will ever come to Canada. I think. Oh, the second one was Tito Julius on a Zoom call, and I think he hesitated to answer that, but he said no, never. The mandatory vaccine will never come to Canada, and if it did, that they will fight it. He will fight it. But then, yesterday I saw a lot. I follow Mr. Puliev, but he is very quiet about the mandatory vaccines. And I even said to him, right on his face, that I'm a big fan of yours. I think you're the rock star of Question Period. So I want you to put your name in the leadership. But I'm very disappointed. And I was almost ready to make a meme that says, evil thrive when good men do nothing. And I would have put Mr. Poliev's photo for the good man who says nothing. But if not Mr. Poliev, who are the other contenders you think are good to lead the party of the CPC?
I can tell you since the election, Peter McKay and Pierre Poilievre are working hard. Those teams are already working towards the leadership because, as you can know, if we want to have a leadership review, we need to have networks who get together to push the present leader out. So those guys are working behind the scene to kick out Mr. O'Toole, and I hope they succeed because O'Toole needs to be kicked out. That's first of all. That's my point of view. But also, if you look at the kind of leader this party was bringing for the past 10 years, Maxime Bernier is a libertarian. So if he would still be with this party, it will be the same old, talking about economy. Pierre Poilievre has a very strong position about the economy. He's a great debater. Mm-hmm. But when you ask him simple questions like, would you get the jobs yourself? Would you fight it? The answer is in the experience of the last 19 months. Where was Pierre Poilievre against the government, against those situations that we are experiencing? At least Maxime Bernier has got the memo and came out last fall against the lockdowns and all that because he understood that it was his only chance to get some political traction. But I also said that last year that I quoted him last year. He said, "If I need to have the job to travel, I will take the job." So that's Maxime Bernier's quote, So those guys they have no moral values. That's the problem. That's where the problem is. And the COVID crisis is not there temporarily. As you may know now, it's the new world order that it is putting against Canada and against all the Western countries. Mm-hmm. We have a change of culture that used to be pushed from the liberal agenda, and now it's within our own government. And the official opposition of the CPC was silent about that for the past 19 months.
That's right.
And that's a problem. And that's why the CPC never got off the ground, because Mr. O'Toole, during the campaign, was saying, I have a plan. But when you ask him two simple questions, like you did with Pierre Poilievre, you don't get an answer. An answer is very simple. It's no.
Yeah, that's right. Exactly.
And if it's no, you need to be doing your official opposition job, that is to contest the government. They gave a support to this government for the past 19 months. And I have to tell you that we don't have a government for the past 19 months. We have a decree that is reinstated every week or every 15 days for the past 19 months. And they are deciding in within a few people inside the government what we will be doing, and everything goes against our freedom. Mm-hmm. So where's the Freedom Party? It's certainly not the CPC, and the People's Party is not bringing solutions to ensure that we will have freedom in the near future, because we are working for the next generations. And based on that, I don't see Mr. Maxime Bernier presenting any solutions other than yelling that we need to keep the freedom. Freedom is not the end. Truth is the real thing. And Mr. Pierre Poilievre, if he had been saying the truth, he would say he would tell you what he thinks about your simple question. He cannot answer it because he's stuck between his leader and himself. And he wants to preserve himself for the next leadership because he knows it's coming.
Well, I think the last 19 months, we didn't have a government. We had the media and the unelected health ministers ruling our country. Back to you, Richard.
Okay. So now let's ask a really simple question. There's a school of thought within the Conservative Party, within certain members, etc., that basically say, look, we're in a minority government and an election, the government could fall at any time. We could have another election at any time. Trudeau is saying maybe another election in 18 months. I don't think it'll be that soon. I think the economy next year is going to be worse off. And so Trudeau's not going to jump to an election right away. But let's just say we could have an election at any time. So there's a school of thought among some conservatives saying changing leaders like we change our underwear is not a good solution. And you're saying we really should change leaders and Aaron O'Toole shouldn't be the leader of the CPC. What would you say to those members of the Conservative Party who believe, okay, look, Aaron O'Toole didn't do well, but maybe he'll learn from his mistakes and we shouldn't just change leaders every time there's an election? What are your thoughts on that? What would you say to them?
Having an election is like going to the doctor. So if you don't change your underwear when you go to the doctor, when they're dirty, I think you're making a major mistake.
I like it. That's a good answer, Mr. Dickinson.
But seriously, I think we need to go through the principle. I think we are, and Derek Sloan's campaign was based on, he was presenting himself as a principled patriot. And I think we need to go back to those roots that build that country, that build the Western world. We have a Western culture that we're losing for the past 50 years with those liberals bringing it down so badly that we need to fight back, but we don't know how to do it. It's very simple. When I said a few things during my leadership race, I made a major scandal saying about truth. I was just saying that as a government, conservative government, you cannot be financing or funding abortion. That's not up to the federal to do that. So they should be support. They should have supported that, and the conservative were appalled by it. But also the PPC was not doing his job as a libertarian because they could not even figure the idea of defunding abortion. And I said, you're not a libertarian. I'm more libertarian than you, Maxime, based on that. So I think it's important that Canadian takes time to reflect about the situation. And I think the crisis that is not finished, and it won't be finished soon, we are going deeper and deeper. As you can see, in Quebec, we have the passport since last July. It was announced. Then we got scooped by Jason Kenney. Jason Kenney was conservative until I was there when it happened, This guy is doomed if there's an election in Alberta because he was a social conservative. I know very well Jason in those years, in 2003-4. We were like buddies. We were like the social conservative of this party. And now look at what he's doing. He is executing the orders of those who are controlling governments. And that's where, from the beginning of your show, when you start by saying people lost confidence in politicians, they lost confidence because the politicians are not bringing us real values. They're just repeating things that are liberal agenda. And that's why we are tired of that. I think the next election, and we'll have a great result pretty soon with the municipal elections. I think with the participation rate is going to be even lower about what we compared to what we had with the federal election. So that's very scary. We're going down under 50% of participation, and that's scary in when you try to present yourself as a majority government, let's say. So I think all the election that we'll be seeing in the next year will show that participation is very bad. When I was in Alberta, people were asking us, could we go to vote without the mask? And we said, Election Canada said that the mask is not required when you go voting.
Mm.
So imagine it was implemented mandatory everywhere in the province, but not for the election. It makes no sense. But that was the decision of Election Canada. When we told that to people, they said, "Okay, I'm going to go."
Mm-hmm.
When they went to schools and churches, they were refused at the door.
Mm.
And Election Canada had to tell them to go elsewhere. Imagine the fraud that could happen just there. And also the people who are told that they went back home. They didn't go
Mhm.
voting.
Mhm.
And that's exactly what's happening presently in Alberta on the municipal election, because people were told in schools, "You're not allowed inside my school if you don't have your passport, your vaccine passport." So
That,
they were refused to enter the school to go voting in a municipal election based on that. It's a major scandal, but it shows that we have to elevate the debate now. We have to go back to the real values that build that country, and we need to support a party that will be presenting us with such policies. And this is the True North Party that you'll hear from in the next months, at the latest, at the beginning of the next year.
mhm. Go ahead, Richard.
Okay. All right. So here's the dilemma that I see coming down the pipeline. The Conservative Party, to win a majority, needs about 35, 37% of the vote. Usually there's about less than 40% of Canadians that are conservative minded, let's say. Now, if we have the Conservative Party right now, the CPC, representing the red Tory faction, kind of, as they're kicking out the social conservatives. Then you have the PPC representing a kind of libertarian, or they pick, whatever is the issue of the day and run on that. And then you have the True North Party, which encompasses social conservatives and fiscal conservatives, and it's kind of a more true blue party, unapologetically true blue. Don't you think that's going to divide up the vote and allow the Liberals to run up the middle and win more elections as the conservative vote is divided, like back in the days between the Reform and the PC party?
The problem with this point of view is you are doing mathematics instead of politics. So when you're taking a quarter of a tart and you're saying, "Oh, maybe we are splitting the quarter of the tart in two and three and this and that," you are losing the big picture, in the sense that what I do personally, I want to have a complete tart to work with. So when I launched the idea of a new party with Derek Sloan in Quebec, Derek Sloan is a unilingual English guy.
Mm-hmm.
So when I started that before the election was called, in Quebec, I had 40 candidates out of 78.
Hmm.
Like this. Those people are not running in elections, and a lot of them are not even voting anymore for the past decade because they lost confidence in politicians.
Hmm.
So we need to look at the big picture. How can we go back to 75, 80% of participation rate? That's what I'm looking for. And if you do that, it's very easy to imagine that you have 35% of conservative in those guys, because those who have lost confidence, I can tell you, because I know well the market or the people themselves. When you do door knocking, you know well your customers. I can tell you, they tell you in your face what they think, and they are conservative. With Harper, we have found out that all the ethnic communities were liberals because they came to Canada when it was Trudeau father, and they thought it was normal to be liberal. When we told them the values of the Conservative Party under Harper, we brought them with us, and they said, "We won't say it publicly because we're scared of the power, of the government, but we will ask our people to vote for you." And that's how the Conservative became elected in 2006, partly around the cities like Toronto, Montreal, Vancouver. That's how we made inroads in places that were not supposed to be conservative at all. In Quebec, we have a very Bloc Québécois area called Saguenay-Lac-Saint-Jean, who it was impossible for a liberal or conservative to be elected there. We had two MPs over there based on the fact that people over there are hunters and they were against the liberal strategy against the guns,
Mm-hmm.
you know? So that kind of politics is, in my book, the way we should look at it. And it's not with people like O'Toole or McKay or Poliev that you will go to that level. Those guys are looking at the quarter of the tart, and they are working on that, and they're putting a lot of money on research and strategies and all that. But just looking at this part, you're losing the big picture. And a lot of Canadian, when we door knock and we meet them, they tell us, if you go ahead with your values, that's what they told me during my leadership campaign. They said, I don't know who you are, but if you do what you just said, I said three things, very simple things. If you do that, we'll vote for you. And that was in Vancouver, it was in Alberta, it was everywhere.
Wow. Wow. Mr. Dickory, I have a lot of questions. I don't know which one to ask first, but let me ask. Traditionally, I think the American conservatives and the Canadian conservatives probably have some sort of like brotherhood with each other. Traditionally, I would imagine. I don't know if that really happens, but this morning, I I wasn't able to log in to the court hearing, but I know that today's the sentencing of the famed Pastor Arthur Pavlovsky in Calgary. We had him last week as our guest. He just came back from a 4 month speaking tour in the U.S. And he was sharing with us his opportunity to have a conversation with General Michael Flynn
Mhm.
and many very influential politicians in the United States in the conservative side of America. And they
Mhm.
were saying that, don't touch this man. If you put this man into prison, they are going to work hard to put sanctions or rally in front of Canadian embassies, and that will put an advisory that Canada has fallen to communism and all kind of stuff. But do you think that still works in this kind of environment? Because there's such a feeling now that the ruling, the world rulers doesn't anymore. It seems a lot of people believe now there's no more conservatives and liberal. They're all now um, global cabal, like the world new world order controlling all of our countries. Do you think something like that, a pressure from the United States, would still work too with our officials here in Canada?
Thanks you, Joe, for bringing that part of the debate, because we have to talk about our great neighbor that is the United States. And as you know, we have great links with the Republican over there. We need to establish those links. The network political networking in these days is very interesting, because we have friends all over Europe. We have friends even in Russia and probably in China, but they're controlled. But we have a lot of support from the States, and they know exactly what's happening here. And I can tell you that a guy like Derek Sloan has established those links. Like social conservative are very strong to be networking with Washington and others. So we need to look at what's happening there. As you know, 2022 will probably bring back the two chambers Republican. So you can imagine what could happen from that point of view, that moment, for the next 2 years following for the next presidency election. And that is, in my book, a great way of doing strategy politically in Canada for the next 4 years, is to establish those network with those who could support us in many ways. Look, what happened in the States when they saw that we were imprisoning, and when I say we, it's Jason Kinney who
Yes,
imprisoned the pastor.
yes,
That for me is incredible. It's like asking your most Christian elected premier and to ask him to go against his own values. That's the way the bankers are working
yes,
in this country. And I think that's what happened. They are forcing him to do that because it makes no sense. That's the last person I would have thought that
that's right.
would have done that. But when it happened in the States, they were starting to be doing politics against Canada, against the Canadian government, against the provinces, saying we need to intervene in this country. So when you hear that, it's pretty impressive because, as you know, we're supposed to be two sovereign countries. But when our neighbor is talking like that, we're not far from something that will be militarized, eventually. So imagine if in 2022 we have the two chambers in the States who are Republican, and then they will work for the next election, but they will also support any real conservative in Canada. And I think that will be interesting to be building those links in the near future.
Richard.
So, Richard, if and when Elections Canada registers Derek Sloan's True North Party, are you going to run as a candidate in the next election for that party?
Yeah, every day is we have surprises in politics. As you know, a year is a day, and a day is a year in politics. So it's very hard to make predictions. I do it for fun because I like to do that, and I'm very intuitive. So usually I have 80% results. At the last election, I had 100% result. So I was pretty good. I was impressed. I impressed myself at this time. So what will happen in the next months and year is impossible to predict because of what we just discussed. There's a lot of fluidity about the capacity of doing things, especially when the government, and I would say governments, because all the premier are in the same boat, they are governing by decree. Trudeau has said that his first action politically with the new government would be for the COVID. So where's the economic development? Where are the policies? There's nowhere. They're going to do worse than what they did for the past 19 months. Mm-hmm. So you can imagine that we'll have to react to that. Just today in Quebec, the Minister of Health had told us that they would fire all the public nurses, not public, but the nurses and the doctors who were not double jabbed by Friday, this Friday, October 15. Problem, the staff we are understaffed in those hospitals, like it is the case in Ontario and probably across Canada. So this beautiful country of Canada, who is saying to the Americans that we have the best system, the healthcare system, it's not true. We all know that. But now when a minister in a government is saying we're gonna suspend the employees that we need the most, we're gonna suspend them without pay, and they won't have any recourse on unemployment or anything. Can you imagine that? This is the official discourse that we had last week. And today the minister caved in and he has put a knee on the floor saying, I'm going to bring back this ultimatum to the November 15. November 15, it's going to be the same situation. But what is happening now, presently in Australia and in Italy? In Italy, next Friday, October 15, it will be every employees of the country that will need to be double jabbed to work.
Wow.
So if they are doing that, it's because it will come to Canada eventually. Like what's happening in Australia for our summertime, that was wintertime over there. It was so aggressive that we think it's a movie. No, it's reality. In a country that is very close to Canada, when you think about it, the economy and the way it is. So if we have that in the next year, I can tell you, Richard, that I cannot predict anything because we'll probably be in a civil war if it continues that way.
That is unfortunate. What's funny too, Mr. Dekari, in the United States, the Democrat was always saying, look at Canada at their universal health care. That's what we need because everybody nobody should be exempted. It shouldn't be a privilege. Healthcare should be a right, a human right. But then now they're also drumming up, if you're not vaccinated, you don't get healthcare in the future. That is a double speak that George Orwell was talking about. But my question for you right now is the media, the Mr. Dick.
Just on that, Joe,
Yeah.
just sorry to interrupt, but
Yes. Yeah.
there was real case of people who were supposed to get transplanted organs,
Hmm.
Mm-hmm.
and they were refused because they were not double jabbed.
That is
It
crazy.
already happened the past weeks. So don't, we're not saying that it will, it is
It is
happening
now.
already. So you can imagine maybe in 2022, they will refuse myself, who is not jabbed, will never be. I won't
Neither am I.
be able to get to the hospital. It makes no sense. My daughter was refused at the university because she was not double jabbed.
Wow.
How can you refuse to give education to our kids? We are already there, and it's called Canada. I don't agree with that.
Hmm.
So I think, other than the conservative mishmash that we're talking about, the reality of this country, we are on a verge or of a civil war or something else, because we need to address that. And I think we need to do it as a citizen. And that's why I'm involved in politics. And that's why I'll be supporting Derek Sloan's new party for sure, because we need to bring the most people that we can towards that channel of action, I would say.
Mhm. And I would say, really, we have an opportunity, even the provincial election, municipal election coming,
Yeah.
to still have a little bit more wiggle room here to have a revolution that is peaceful via election, because a lot of people are like what you said, they feel like, something's got to give. People are
Yeah.
angry. People are, the velocity of anger is just going going fast. But Mr. Dickery, the media in this country and the media in the United States, we know that it is controlled. It is controlled by wokeness, controlled by political correctness, controlled by even most likely the big pharma, controlled by the corporations that are controlling the narrative. So we are on the right side of history. Social conservatives, I would say, some libertarians, some freedom movement. We are on the right side of the history, but the media always spin us in the wrong way. And in Canada, the media is in, they will not bite the hands that feed them, and they just got what, 600 million. Uh, I think the grant in last year. How do we solve this in our society, that to balance the opinion in public discourse, when the media is always just one-sided, always spinning them to be the right and spinning us to be fake news, or our argument to be wrong.
That's interesting, because we, as conservative, we always complain about the media. I think it's a mistake, personally. I like to go to Radio Canada and kick their butt. I love that. You know, the problem, once I do it and they think it's intelligent, they don't invite me anymore. So
Mm-hmm.
that's the way they control you. It's by ignoring you, and because they are controlled, they have no choice. So if you think that way, a lot of people are suffering inside those institutions.
Yes.
We have a lot of MPs who are staying quiet because they want to save their function, but they would love to see somebody like me kicking some butts around. So we need to also look at the reality of things. People are supporting the governments who are doing those crazy things. Francois Legault, the premier of Quebec, is the most popular politician these days.
Mm-hmm.
It's completely out of mind when you think about it, because you cannot you cannot say that he's wrong, he's a traitor, and he goes against the best of Quebecers and Canadian. And at the same time, people are saying that he's a great leader. So I think the population needs to suffer more before they will be mature enough to elect a real conservative government. That's my personal stand, in the sense that time is on our side. You said that the conservative are on the good side of the spectrum, and I agree with you, but not on the short term. And I can tell you that since 2003, when I was working with Harper, an English guy from Alberta in Quebec, I know how opposition works. I can tell you, the media were laughing at me in those days, saying, "Are you helping this guy?" Chantal Hébert told me that I should sell popsicle to Eskimos. That she said in those days. It wouldn't pass in Radio Canada these days, I can tell you. But that's what she told me literally in 2003-4.
Wow.
And every time I met her, she was tired of me telling her, "So, how do you like our new prime minister?" Prime Minister. So I think we are on the good side of the spectrum, but people are not.
Mm-hmm.
So the population is not ready. They still think this crisis is temporary, and it's going to be solved with a jab or a pill or something. It won't happen. So the more they see that the reality is against them, I can tell you there's a lot of people who are saying, myself and my wife, we are working in hospitals. We will lose our job next October 15. We will lose our house, but we will never get the jobs. And they are working with people who are receiving the shots and dying, are getting very sick. And they know that the media are not talking about that.
That's right.
When
Well,
we were in Alberta, there was that big demonstration at the major hospital over there in Calgary. And the nurses were crying, telling us, we need to tell people what the reality is. We see people dying and getting sick, not from the COVID SARS-CoV-2 virus. They are getting sick by the jabs.
yes.
So when they said that, we said, we know. We can say it out loud, but the media won't say it that way. At the opposite, they will do the propaganda that they've been doing for the past 19 months. But it started many years ago.
Yes.
I often say, where were you 10 years ago against abortion? Nobody was fighting abortion. Now you are receiving the results, because abortion is a human sacrifice to evil. That's what it is. And if you've been doing it with your arms crossed and going to your chalet and working on your family and your little comfort, you were ignoring a situation that should have been addressed as a criminal situation.
Just a quick follow up on that, Mr. Zachary, because they actually made it now a restriction to protest in front of hospitals in Alberta, because the media helped the government spin it as it's causing stress to the hospital workers, when actually the hospital workers are the one being defended by those protests. They were speaking for the nurses, speaking for the doctors, but then they spin it, and the media always kind of make their narrative be more loud and clear. Now, even if we have a conservative government, I think the media will stay the way they are. Are we just going to live with this kind of media forever? And how, is there a way to reverse the media to be balanced and honest?
About that thing about the new rules about the fact that you're not allowed to have a demonstration close to a hospital or a school. We have that in Quebec also. And I have a funny anecdote about that, because the government presented that law project, saying that we will enforce the fact that people are not allowed to demonstrate in front of school and churches. And in the article that was written in the mass media, they were saying that also it will be criminal to say that the premier is a dictator.
They're just controlling our speech.
So when it was presented in the mass media, like it's the Bible. People think that what's written in the newspaper, like Journal de Montréal, is certainly true. They wouldn't write it. So when they wrote that, my question was, is it in the project of law? It's not. No, it's not written that way. But the journalist that wrote it, he must have got it from somebody. So they were trying to say something like that to see the impact. I can tell you that if they put that, you're not allowed to say that the premier is a dictator, it's because they know he is acting like a dictator for the past 19 months.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the kind of stupid situation. I think the dog is biting its tail now, because they're doing things that go against what they are bringing. Like we have a guy in Quebec who went into a store without a mask. He's a teacher at Brébeuf College. It's where Justin Trudeau went to college, just to tell you, a private school for the elite. This guy was a teacher there, but he said, my freedom is more important, and he went against the lockdowns and all that. So he went into a store without a mask. He got arrested. He got fined, like many Canadians, and he contested the fine, and he was asked to go to court. When he went to court last week or 2 weeks ago, he was told to put a mask, and he said, I don't put a mask. But they said, you have to go to court. He said, I want to go to court, but you're refusing me the entrance. So the judge said it was against the tribunal, and he did 7 days in prison because he refused to go to the court where he said, I want to go without a mask.
Our friends, Lawyers for Truth, is actually suing the courts of Alberta, in the courts of Alberta for the mask mandate. So that is
at Theo Vox, at the show we do in French in Quebec. You have a great guy in out west in Alberta. He's called John Carpe. John is doing a great job, and we're glad that he's back on the job, because that's where we need to fight. This guy is helping a lot of people about going to court, but we have to understand that a lawyer and courts are suspended when there's a war measure that we have for the past 19 months. And because of that, people don't understand that it's through the health system that they're doing it now. They're so brilliant. Instead of using the army in the streets like they did in 1970 with the Trudeau father in Quebec, it's a bit rough when you see that. So what they do, instead of war measure, they say it's health emergency measures. It's the same reality. And I think you have a great example with Saskatchewan. When I was in Alberta and Saskatchewan declared the War Measure Act, where they can seize your property, your crops, your children, it's written black on white.
Right. Yeah.
I was not sure I would be able to cross back Saskatchewan to come back to Quebec. And when I entered Saskatchewan, it was written, to enter Saskatchewan, you need to be double jabbed with a vaccine passport.
Wow.
That I will never have. So I didn't stop to go to the restaurant, I can tell you, or the convenience store. No way I would stop there.
It's crazy what's happening in Saskatchewan.
It is.
All right. So the question then is, what is your advice for our freedom fighting audience when we're living in any province where we're living in, the noose is tightening around our necks? Vaccine passports in some form or another are being introduced in each and every province. The global world seems to be in lockstep, pushing this double jab and then the booster and then whatever else, and digital identification and all these kind of things, all the plans of the New World Order. How, what is your advice? I know you mentioned that we may be pushed into a civil war, but really, what is your advice to our audience to fight for our freedoms, to get our liberties back that have been literally stolen away from us? Our courts here in Ontario, our courts have had several challenges, 2 challenges that I know of, where they were charter challenges, and both times the judges refused to listen to the charter challenge. So if our courts are not even judicial anymore and upholding the law, what are fellow Canadians supposed to do?
Those measures, emergency measures, were supposed to be put in place when there's a major crisis. There was not even a pandemic in 2020. Now we know it. We have all the numbers, No media will talk about it. So the reality is there. There was no pandemic. There was no need for those war measures put in place in the first place in 2020. But now they are going further in 2021. And I cannot imagine what will happen this winter when the real viruses will come back. As you know, if I cough in a public place, people freak out these days because they are brainwashed about the fact that there's no pandemic. There's none. There's a real virus that was built from the human people in a human laboratory that was funded by Canada, the States, France, and everywhere. So we all know that picture now. So what should we be doing? It's very simple. I think we need to be part of a conservative movement. My contribution in Quebec since I left Harper in 2005 is to build that movement under the name of conservativeunion.ca. Very simple. So I tell people, get there, you'll get the information. I'm very active on Twitter and Facebook, very easy to find, English and French. So nobody can say that they don't know about the reality of the situation. I present facts, I present the truth. So that's my contribution. And when I see somebody like Derek Sloan, who stands up to the government as an elected MP, who is suffering and his family is suffering from what he has been experiencing the past month, I think he brings us a lot of hope about what can be done politically. So the only party in the near future that will be representing what you're looking for, solutions, the reality about the experience of what Canada is doing, is the True North Party. There's no other. The PPC is like the Maverick Party. They are there to contest, to yell, but not to bring solutions. So don't invest your time in those things. And if you are those Canadians who left politics many years ago and said, I don't trust anybody anymore, you should trust those who are fighting for you, for your values, for your family. We are there to protect the kids. Their parenting is in jeopardy with the communist prime minister we have in Canada. You know that Justin Trudeau is impressed by the communist China. That communism means that your kids are not yours anymore. And I can tell you, that's what we are experiencing for the past 19 months.
That's right.
When I see kids with the muzzles outside, they put their muzzle to walk on the sidewalk alone. They are brainwashed already. So we need to have a real political party that will represent that. And I think that's the True North. And until then, the conservative movement exists by itself. Those who say that's enough, they are doing the first step. You can contest. I participate in a lot of demonstrations. We had the last one was 150,000 people in Montreal. That's a lot of people. I was at the one in Calgary where there was 10,000 people, and I said, it's not much. They said, it's incredible in Calgary. We used to have 200 people. Now we have 10,000. So we have to be part of that, but people will need to suffer more in the next years. So it's a double process. While the coercion is increasing from the governments, and it will continue, we need to organize ourselves to bring the solution for maybe 2030. Because as you know, the globalist plan is 2020, 2030. It's written, it's very easy to find. It's ID 2020. There's no viruses that can kill us. It's not true. They want to put an identification number to each human on this planet.
Yes.
And when we just say that, we are the most rebel people in Canada.
That's right. That's right.
And 2 years ago, we would have been presented as complotist terrorists,
Conspiracy theorists.
Now we are seen as defending our rights. It's very different. So the shift is very important. And why is it happening this way? In my book, it's very, very simple. 2020 was the year of the beginning of the apocalypse. Apocalypse means revelation. The revelation of the bad, I think it's pretty clear. It came out in March 2020 in Canada. So if the bad is revealing itself, it's a great opportunity for the good to be revealed. And I can tell you that every time I take a public stand for the best based on our Christian values, I am applaud. I see a lot of people, the same thing with Derek Sloan. he has been doing great meetings where people would say, I would follow this guy because of what he said. So we are there, and that's where we can have hope for the future. But in the near future, it's going to be worse exponentially. So the next years are going to be tough. Let's get together, but let's get together with real core values that were the traditional conservative values.
Hmm. Wow, time is going fast, and I will have one last question. Maybe Richard will have one too. But my last question is, what kind of people will the True North Party looking forward to run in the ridings? Because a lot of people in the movement are, the rumbles between the group chats and the private messages are like, when are we gonna see ordinary folks, ordinary Janes and Joes throwing their name in the hat? I think the way we can clean house is to get rid of the traditional politicians, the corrupt politicians, and really m- people want to see regular, ordinary folks who really know what's going on the ground, what's going on in the schools, what's going on in the hospitals, the ordinary moms, the uncles, and your corner store, your corner barber, and all them who knows what's going on in their
Sure.
community. What will you be looking for? Will you be having a candidate in every riding of this country, and what kind of people are you looking for to install as your candidates?
Very
Mr.
interesting way of putting it. With Harper in 2004, we had a snap election that was launched by the Martin government because they were very afraid of what Harper was doing. So we didn't have time to get ready, especially in Quebec. My goal then was to have 75 candidates out of 75 ridings. And we succeeded it by doing it with ordinary people, like you just said. So what I said, I just contacted our network of people who say, we don't believe in politics anymore. We don't get involved with parties. And I would tell them, if I bring you those values, would you support it? Right away, yes, I would do it. Okay, so I'm asking you to put your name and your picture on posts because you will be the candidate in this riding. And I guarantee you that you won't be elected. That was my sales pitch to ensure that we have ordinary people. I would promise them they would never be elected
Because they're
because
afraid.
most ordinary people, they have jobs, they have family, they have things to do like we all do. But I would assure them that they would have a great experience, and that's what happened. I can tell you that out of the 75 candidates we had at that time, a lot of them said, I enjoyed it. It's incredible to defend your value. I got more assured of myself. I spoke to media. I was impressed. And with your support, because we are there as um, experienced politicians, and we have a lot of social conservative who are waiting to have a vehicle where they can work. As you probably know, the PPC has recruited a lot within the social conservative. Even Maxime Bernier last year in 2020 asked me, since I was kicked out of the leadership race, he said, now are you joining me? And I said, why should I join you? You're a libertarian. But he was recruiting a lot of social conservative. And I was telling them, that you won't be able to defend your own values with this party. So it's a way of educating people to the reality of politics. And unfortunately, for the past 19 months, every Canadian needs to get involved in politics for the first time. For most of them, the first time in their life, they have to ask themselves real questions about politicians and policies. And I think that brings us a lot of potential to recruit ordinary people across Canada. And I'm sure that TNP, the True North Party, will easily recruit 338 candidates. We had a lot of support, even though Derek was running in one riding. We would receive phone calls all over the country saying, I want to get involved with you. And we would tell them, it won't be this time, unfortunately.
Last question, maybe Richard, and then
So
we'll.
my last question is: looking down the looking glass, 6 months down the road, do you see whether Aaron O'Toole is he going to maintain the leadership of the Conservative Party, or is there going to be a review and he's either going to step down and not be the leader?
I hope he's going to be kicked out of his leadership. As you know, the way it's presented, the caucus can put him out of the caucus.
Mm-hmm.
They cannot fire him as the leader of the opposition, but they can fire him out of the caucus. So the day it will happen, it's exactly what happened to Andrew Scheer. What they did, what the party or the executive of the party did to Andrew Scheer, talking about his kids at private schools and all that, it's so dirty. It's amazing to see that happening in this party, you know, because the party, the executive part of the party, knew exactly what were the conditions. They were making the condition of this guy who has 5 children, who had to bring them to Ottawa, and it was very simple for him to ask for the school support of his children. Don't just to say that publicly against him is to show the way we get rid of somebody in politics.
Mm-hmm.
They can play very dirty, and I'm amazed to see how poorly dirty they were against me. They had nothing against me, probably. That's why they didn't say a word. But that's usually the way it happens. So it will be the same with O'Toole. Why? Because the McKay and Poiliev people and probably others are playing by the same rules. And they are sharpening their knives already for the past weeks. So they will probably tell him, either you resign or we will get you in the corner, you know? So I think he won't survive in the next 6 months. And I think it's great for the conservative movement as a whole, because you have a lot of conservative who are still within this party and looking for a family. So I'm always there when we need to make some cleaning inside an organization, because I'm against corruption. And personally, I know that when there's one rotten apple, you need to make a big clean, because I used to have supermarkets personally, so I'm used to deal with the corruption that can come within food. So it's the same reality in politics. So it's time to clean out the house, and I hope we'll start by putting out O'Toole, even though he stays as an MP like Andrew Scheer did. It would be great to put him aside and to look for another leader.
Well, Mr. Decary, you have a TV show in Quebec, so it's a breath of fresh air that we hear social conservative perspective from a brother and a brethren from Quebec, and they are spoiled to have you on a weekly television show. But here we only have social media to listen to Mr. Sloan and others that has the same resonating voice like we do. So, for the sake of English Canada, please give us your last words that we need to keep in mind until the next time we have you here. And I would like to just extend the welcome to you. Please come back again. We are going to submit our request already, because you are very valuable guest to our show. You give a lot of insight. Thank you for joining us. Please give us a few minutes of your last thoughts for English
I'm always
Canada.
available, so don't hesitate to ask me. I'm always available for interviews. I think you're doing a great show, and I commend it. So personally, I think we need to be part of the resistance. I see ourselves for the past 19 months probably like the French were at the beginning of the Second World War. You know, the first day you have the Germans in the streets with tanks and an army that is, you know, in front of your bakery or your little commerce there. They must have asked themselves, is it for real? And the more they grew into this war, they found out the atrocity of a war. And I think we are in the same situation, but globally, all the world is into that. So it's hard to keep hope into those situations. We are blessed to be Christians because it's easy for us to see the blessings of being part of that spiritual war that we are in. So I tell people who are not believers to hang in there. You need to resist, like those who did during the war, because after 2 years of war, they probably thought it was the end of the world. It was certainly the end of their world. But that after the war, they saw that we can rebuild it. And personally, I'm there to be working for rebuilding this country. If it's in 2031, so it be. But personally, I will work for the building the resistance and make sure we have a political vehicle like True North or others that will be giving people the capacity to get involved, not only against those lockdowns policies and those dictatorship policies, but also to be part of a body of solution. A political party is a way of putting your feet where your mouth is. You know what we say in French. You need to follow what you're saying. You need at one point you'll need to take a stand. So if you didn't get the jobs already and you're stuck with the reality of losing your job, you will need to make a decision eventually. So the more we resist against that, the more we are building the new movement. And I think we are blessed, and this country is blessed to have the capacity to go back to a reality that wasn't far from us. I'm old enough to have seen this country in a great shape in the 60s, and I've seen a lot of destructions from the liberals, starting with the liberal father Trudeau, and seeing it at the end with the son. I think it's biblical.
Thank you. Joe, I think you're muted.
Am I muted? Sorry.
There you go.
There you go. Thank you very much, Mr. Dekari. Thank you so much for joining us today, and we're looking forward again to have you next time in the future. But folks, our guest today is truly one of the leaders of the freedom movement, I would say, even though he is in the political realm, and some voices in the freedom movement says we don't need politicians. We exactly need politicians who have experience and knows the values and the history of this country to lead us back to the right path. Thank you, Mr. Dekari. Don't go away. When we come back, me and Richard will close the show. Again, God bless you, Mr. Dekari. And
Au revoir.
Au revoir, Richard. Merci.
Thank you, sir. There you go, folks. So let's don't go away. When we come back, Richard and I will have a closing. But we for I'm not ready with it. Sorry, Richard. Where is it? There you go. So don't go away. We'll be right back after these short messages.
Freedom Fighter Radio. What is up? Whoa! Shout out to Freedom Fighter Radio and Joe. You're doing great work, brother, and I love it. All right, always.
Make sure you listen to the Freedom Fighter Radio on the Ordinary Show.
I'm on Freedom Fighter Radio on the Ordinary Joe Show. That's quite a mouthful. Yes.
Hey guys, this is Chris Sky. Listen to Freedom Fighter Radio. They're here today, back in the blue, and so am I.
Please consider supporting the OJTV production costs and be an insider member for only $3 a month. Go to patreon.com/OJTV Canada. Thank you for your continued support.
Canadians all across the country are sick and tired of the lies, the fear-mongering, and the hate speech they hear from the mainstream media. Download the free radio app, Freedom Fighter Radio. Click the link below, scan our QR code, join our mailing list, and get a free download of our Freedom Fighter Radio app only here on OJTV on The Ordinary Joe Show.
Yes, it's Power Joe Politics, only here on The Ordinary Joe. Thank you for sticking around. Shout out to all our Patreon partners, Alice, Victor, Christine, Evie, Richard, Rob, Esther Kanevsky, Arthur Miko, Edward Ronquillo, David Carlson, Dina Parley. And if you would like to be part of our Patreon family, go to patreon.com/ OJDV Canada and let me figure out how to get that banner out. Here you go. All right. Thank you guys for joining us for tonight's Power Drill Politics. Was an awesome, in my opinion, that was an awesome, again, every time we have Mr. Dicari part of guesting on our show, always get a very insightful conversation, always getting a wealth of information and perspective of a French Canadian brother perspective about Canada, social conservatism, and it brings us together as one Canada. Whenever we have Mr. Dickery. What are your thoughts, Richard? What are your thoughts about our episode tonight?
Well, I think our episode was fantastic. I think Richard Decaria, I agree with so much what he has to say, and I really like when he gives us his predictions of what he sees is going to happen in the future. He speaks so honestly and with such truth and conviction that I truly support him as in what he has to say. And I just enjoy him being our guest. So I enjoy having him on our show. I want to have him back again. I'm looking forward to that. And especially in the next few months, we see what happens with Aaron O'Toole, what happens with the Conservative Party, and also what happens with the True North Party with Derek Sloan and the work that Richard is doing with it. I'm looking forward to seeing, what is the progress once Election Canada finally gets back to work and reviews the 250 signatures and officiates and makes the True North Party an official party across Canada.
Well, you and I, we spoke many times here on the show, and I still claim that I am more libertarian myself. I think my conviction is libertarian, but last time we had Mr. Dickery, I was saying on my radio show the next day, I was declaring that I am a hybrid. I'm a social conservative libertarian. I don't know if that is allowed to hybrid that, because when it comes to abortion and same-sex marriage and all that, I would consider myself socially conservative. When it comes to like the fiscal, and one thing I maybe reserve with the social conservative stance is the government's uh, regulation of the church. In my opinion, the church should be left alone, 100% independent from any regulation from the government. The church should be allowed to, doesn't need to, file their charity status. I don't think that the church should be allowed to operate on its own, and that's the libertarian side of me when it comes to allowing the church just to operate on their own. Maybe the social conservative says, "Oh, okay, what if a Church of Satan wants to start a church and they do human sacrifices?" Right? So in that sense, of course, we're gonna say, "Oh no," then we have to regulate the faith community. So that's a little a tricky question for me. But when it comes to what we experienced this past 19 months with Kenny locking up Pastor James Coates, Kenny locking up the Pavlovsky brothers, putting fence around churches, that makes me want to say, that the government should have no regulation whatsoever in churches. But what do you think is a solution here when it comes to the church question?
Well, I'll address that in a second. But since you mentioned about Pastor Pawlowski and not being able to log in and see the protests in the morning, which would have been 11 our time, I want to give an update to our audience.
Yes,
So Pastor Pawlowski has posted on his social media. So I'm going to take it for his word for it. This is the sentencing that he says the judge has given him. He says that look at this, he is not allowed to be a pastor for 18 months.
What?
The judge has barred him from being a pastor at his church or in any church in the province of Alberta for 18 months. Plus, he has 18 months probation, so he did not get jail time, but he has 18 months probation, which probably means he has to go to a parole officer.
Sorry to interrupt quickly, Richard, but he doesn't have the right to say that. The judge, I
I,
don't
I
think
agree with
that,
you. I'm
yeah,
agreeing with you.
he doesn't have the right
I want
to.
to read out. Let's. I want to
Yeah.
read out the terms
Mhm.
according to Pastor Art, and then we can discuss it. But I'm agreeing with you absolutely. So number one, he's not allowed to be a pastor for 18 months. Number two, he has 18 months probation. Number three, he has to do 120 hours of community service. And number four, he's not allowed to leave the province of Alberta. The total monetary punishment, according to Pastor Arter, is that between him and his brother David is a total of $50,000. The total monetary punishment is approximately $50,000. So these are the punishments that the judge has put in place against him. I think he has the right to say all of them except for not being a pastor for 18 months. I think that it goes really against the pastor's charter rights.
Just a forewarn. I just realized I only have 5 minutes before I have to go pick up the
No problem.
the boss wife. I don't think the judge has any right to tell anybody if they can be a passer or not. Number
Right.
one, my reactions, quick reactions to those items that you read as the ruling of the judge. I might have mistakenly go into a different hearing because I end up listening to a ruling on Kevin Johnston and a guy named Mr. Smith, who screen capture a court proceeding and post it on his social media and badmouthed the judge, and so they're ruling. So I was waiting for a ruling for Pastor Art. Maybe I went to a different room,
You got Kevin
and
J. Johnson
and
instead.
I got Kevin J. Johnston instead.
Well,
Kevin was not there; just the lawyers are
according
talking.
to our viewer David Carlson, he's saying that the judge, who is Adam Germain,
Yep,
is the liberal from Fort McMurray.
he looks like he's someone who is like he doesn't look like a smart person. I don't know if I can be on contempt of court from Ontario, but I don't know if our honesty now and our opinion on judges and our because this Mr. Smith that they're talking about, he has opinions about this judge and the lawyer, and now he is cited as contempt of court. Well, I don't know. Our freedom of speech. I have a lot of criticism about this judge. I listen to him, and his personality is not very judge like, in my opinion. But just moving forward, so he doesn't have a right to say if a pastor can be a pastor or not, because that is not the domain of the government. Whoever ministers to people, if a pastor becomes a pastor because they're called by God, only God institute pastors and shepherds and ministers, not the judges. Number one. Number two, when he says 120 hours of community service,
Right.
Pastor Art has been putting in 20 years of community service that
Correct.
they have not been acknowledging, and they're fighting against, and they spent $2 million of Calgary taxpayer money to harass the Pavlovsky brothers. I think
Good point.
well, now that I see that, so he's not going to jail. The 4 years sentence, he doesn't say anything about the 4 year sentence there.
Not according to his post on social media. I don't see
So I
anything about a 4-year sentence.
so I would say General Michael Flynn's warning probably is working, but still, this is better than the 4 year sentence and the 2 year sentence for his brother. But this Alberta government is doing a lot of overreach from their powers.
Hmm.
It's not within their powers, and I have to apologize to all our audience members that we're not able to get into. Let's just show some hi from Ireland from
Hmm.
Noreen. Donna Lodge is from Ireland too, I believe.
It's great
So
to have viewers from Ireland. Thank you so
yeah,
much.
we have viewers from across the world, and I apologize that we didn't have time to get to you guys, but I'm going to screenshot all the comments, and maybe next week, Richard, um let's get back to the pattern. Actually, next week is a week good for us to have a guest because I won't have time limit next week. But
Okay, good.
then if we don't have a guest next week, just remember the week after will be, let's put it for just you and me the week after, and the week after that let's have a guest again.
Okay.
Because I don't want to be running quickly when we have a guest. So back to you. I don't know what my point is anymore.
No, your point previously was what was your view about government interference with the churches, right? So I'm in totally agreement with you. I believe in a complete separation between church and state. I don't think that the government should have any control. The problem is the government does have some control because they grant tax-free status to churches, no property tax on churches, and churches, mosques, synagogues, mandirs, everything, gurdwaras, etc. But I think, Joe, I do want to say one thing about traditional political thought, which is I know you've always called yourself a libertarian, but traditionally what a libertarian is, and I don't think you fit that mold, traditionally a libertarian is a fiscal conservative and a social progressive.
Yes.
And I know that you're socially conservative. So being socially conservative and fiscally conservative, you really fit in the traditional mold of what is considered a conservative. However, like Richard was saying, the current Conservative Party of Canada has gone so far to the left or to the center, whatever they want to call it, red Tory, whatever the case may be. And here in Ontario and in Alberta, you have true conservatives, supposedly true conservatives like Kenny or Doug Ford, and they're acting more liberal than they're acting as liberal as Justin Trudeau. It doesn't make sense. But you, in your description, are what a true conservative is all about.
It's interesting that you said that because not Anthony Fury. What's his name? The other guy who does the podcast for True North, Andrew Lawton.
Andrew Lawton, yeah.
He was. I was listening to him yesterday, and he was saying that. Do you know that Karl Marx is actually a libertarian? So I was like taken aback by that. Really, is he a libertarian?
No, because he wasn't a fiscal conservative. He was a fiscal liberal.
Yeah.
Actually, he was a socialist. He was a Marxist. I mean, he was a true Marxist.
Oh, by the way,
he was a pure communist. So no, it could not. That wouldn't have been the case.
By the way, this is out of topic, but I've been trying to look for Karl Marx photos, and all the photos I've seen of Karl Marx is with his hidden hand.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. All of the photos that I've been trying to find a photo of him, and so far all I've seen of Karl Marx has a hidden hand pose with all of
Masonic
his
Illuminati signaling, which I think some of our audience members will appreciate.
That's right. So, well, anyways, I got more points. I got more questions. I got more.
You're short for time. I get it. No problem.
But do a closing, Richard. I think you will have a very poignant insight on just close this entire episode. What are your thoughts, your closing thoughts, and then we'll say goodbye.
Okay, so really quickly, I want to thank again our special guest, Richard Descaries, who is always welcome to return back to our show. I really love his insight. I love the fact that he's a social conservative and he fights for what he believes in. Too long and for decades, our country and even south of the border, they've been taking away the social conservative values. They've been vilifying them. And let's face it, this country and south of the border were based on Judeo-Christian values. They were based on values in the Bible, and we should respect that. This is not something that should be torn down like statues. This is something that has built our country and has made it great. And we have the leftists and the communists and the Marxists trying to rip it down and remove God from our country and from the hearts of men and women. So I salute Richard Descaries for his convictions, for his true beliefs, and for standing up for what he truly believes in. And I thank him for being our guest. He is always welcome to return back to our show. We always are interested in his insight and his knowledge, his experience, and what he can foretell for the future for us.
And just to top that, I think in my impression of Richard Descaries and Derek Sloan, they're not your traditional politician. Really, they speak from the heart. So
yes.
that's why I will be throwing my support to the True North Party when it becomes established. I will campaign for them. I wouldn't have to ask them for campaign funds. If they want to give us campaign funds, I will take it. But even without that, I will campaign for the True North, for Derek Sloan, for Richard Descaries. I will still accept campaign funds for the others. If they want to give me their money, I'll take their money and not as campaign as much. But I will take their money. But with that, folks, thank you, Richard. Thank you, Mr. Descaries, for guesting on our show. Thank you that thank God that we have this platform. Even though we have a lot of shadow banning, I found ways to hack. So even you can look back at Pastor Art's interview. Didn't got a lot of live traction, but it is now gaining a lot of traction on post. So I expect the same for this show. But for all our tuners from all over the world, Doreen and Donna from both from Ireland, and many more from because I'm pretty sure when I look at the insights, I saw that we have 20% of our followers on Freedom Fighter Radio are from Australia. And without folks, Power Joe Politics is here every Wednesday, 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 5 p.m. in Manitoba, 4 p.m. in Saskatchewan and Alberta, 3 p.m. in British Columbia, 7 p.m. on our Atlantic provinces. Rain or shine, Power Joe Politics, only here on The Ordinary Joe. We'll see you again next time. In the last days, God will pour his spirit on all men. That's you and me, the ordinary Janes and Joes. Let's take our country back. Thank you, Richard. Thank you, everyone. God bless you all. Bye-bye.
You're the original Ordinary Joe, but I'm an Ordinary Joe too.
My name is John Tory. I'm the Mayor of Toronto, and you are watching the Ordinary Joe Show. And this is Ordinary Joe right here. He's right here.